Today I'm going to teach you how to install Laravel inside your computer. And before we actually get into the video, I just want to say a couple of things to, before we actually get started on installing and setting up everything. The first thing is that this is a beginner's tutorial. So I will try to, as much as possible, to break things down, explain exactly what we're doing, why do we need this program, everything that you might need to know as someone who has never dabbled in this sort of thing before. So everyone needs to be able to follow this tutorial and hopefully get Laravel installed. Now, of course, people are sitting on different devices out there. My computer is set up differently than another person's computer. Maybe your firewall might block something, Things can change because we don't all have the same computer. So I just want to say that at any point during this tutorial, if you have any sort of struggles, for example, maybe you get an error message, maybe Laravel doesn't want to install, make sure to take that error message and use a help tool like, for example, ChatGPT to tell it, okay, so I'm getting this error message, how can I fix it? And then maybe ChatGPT can tell you how to fix that error. So it's important to know that, getting errors is kind of like part of learning something as a programmer or a developer. So make sure you don't quit if you get an error message. That's really my important thing to say here, because anyone will get error messages. It's about whether or not you're capable of solving it. So using ChatGPT, Googling things, that's just part of being a developer. And again, hopefully we're not getting any sort of error messages in this tutorial here, but I'm just saying you might run into it and it's important to know how to actually solve it if you do actually encounter one. So now as we follow this tutorial, there's going to be different steps in setting up Laravel. And I have them all on screen here so you can actually see each step one by one. And you may look at this list here and say, well, okay, that looks like a long list. Like there's like several steps in here to get Laravel installed, but I don't want you to worry too much about it because most of these steps here is a one-time thing. So once you've done most of these steps, you're done. And unless you're planning on getting a new computer or you have uninstalled Laravel or Composer or whatever on your computer, you won't have to do it again. Okay, so it is something that is a one-time thing for most of these steps here. There's a small section at the bottom there that you do have to do every single time you start a new website project. But again, it's not really that much. It's more of the one-time setup thing that scares people. People get errors in when they try to set up things on their computer. So that's really the struggle there that we have to get past. But it's not that difficult. You just need to know how to do it, right? So now getting started with Laravel is quite a journey if you've never done anything like this before, because you're going to learn a lot of new things in this video here. It's not going to be difficult, but it is new things, right? So the first thing I want to show is when you use a computer, whether that being a Windows machine or a Mac machine or Linux or whatever, you will have to use something called a terminal in order to do things. And this is probably the one step that scares the most people whenever we get started as developers doing things like this, because a terminal is something that you will need to use and everyone uses it. But the first time you see it, you might be thinking, ooh, okay, now this is outside what I'm comfortable with. But I just want you to not worry because it's not really that complex. It's not really that difficult. It's more the mindset of understanding what a terminal is and why it's not scary. Okay, so we need to know what a terminal is. So if you're on a Windows machine, if you go down inside the search bar and type CMD, command prompt, by the way, you can also type in and click enter. Then you're going to see we get this window here. And this is a terminal, or at least this is a command prompt on Windows. If you're on Mac, you're going to have to search for terminal because that's the name of your software. But basically, this is a way to interact with our machine. And you can do many different things like getting information off of your machine. You can change things on your machine. You can even install things off the internet using a terminal, which, by the way, we're going to do in this video here. So a terminal is very normal for developers to use. And it's a really good idea just to sort of get comfortable with it from the start because you are going to have to learn to use a terminal. So this is one of those things that some people look at and say, oh no, this looks like coding, like do we have to code things to just like install Laravel? But it really isn't that difficult. It's just more about not getting scared of the terminal at the beginning. Like that's the difficult part. So with all that said, let's actually go and get started on installing Laravel. So the first thing I want to say is that there's many different ways we can set up Laravel on our computer. We could just install PHP directly onto our computer from PHP's website. You can also install a MySQL server and just run that on your computer. There's many different ways we can do things, okay? Now, the way we are gonna do things, because this is how I've done it in all my other tutorials in my PHP course, is we are going to be using XAMPP, which looks like this. So you're gonna go and install this program onto your computer so you can actually use a server on your computer. And it does also have PHP included into it, so we don't need to install PHP from PHP's website. So it has a bunch of things included. And I just want to point out here as well that if you already have XAMPP installed, make sure you get the latest version. Otherwise, there could be some mismatch between the XAMPP version and whatever Laravel version we're trying to use. So make sure you're getting the latest version of XAMPP. I do also want to point out to you that in the latest version of XAMPP, there is a small change to how you're going to be accessing your websites inside XAMPP, because typically in the older versions, we will go inside our XAMPP folder, inside our htdocs folder, and we will put all our websites in here. As you can see, this has changed a little bit. So instead, we're going to be putting all our websites inside the dashboard folder. Okay, so this is where you want to put your websites. Just ignore what I have in here for now. These are just some private things. But this is where you're going to be opening up your websites and create all your different website folders. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's important you reinstall XAMPP to the latest version if you haven't already. I do have a tutorial on it. So if you click on the link inside my description, you can get to a tutorial where I show how to install XAMPP. So if you have any sort of doubts about that, check out that video. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go and install something called Composer. And I know this looks weird. Okay, I'm well aware. But this is actually what PHP developers use in order to manage all the different dependencies you might be using for all your different PHP projects. Now, just to briefly explain what Composer does, basically, when you have any sort of libraries, frameworks, like for example, Laravel, and you need to have them installed on your system, we need to have them installed into somewhere. Because whenever you want to create a new website, you're not going to have all libraries and frameworks that you might have installed in your computer inside that project. So you need to have some sort of container on your computer that can have all the libraries and frameworks inside of it. And then from there, you can say, okay, I'm going to start this new website project. Which one of these libraries and frameworks do I want to use inside that project? So you can just handpick out which ones you want to use and put inside different projects that you have on your computer, okay? So we need to have something that can contain all the different libraries and frameworks so we can just use them in whichever project we might want to use them in. That is basically what Composer is, okay? So you're gonna go ahead and download Composer and we will actually install it together. I do want to point out here that if you're sitting on Mac, this is going to be slightly different, okay? You want to get inside Getting Started, go into where it says installation for Linux, Unix, and Mac OS. Then you want to go down and make sure you follow these steps for installing it globally. And again, I don't have a Mac, so I can't show you how this is done on a Mac machine. But if you're sitting on Windows, this is a lot easier. So all you want to do is go up to the very top here where it says installation for Windows. And then you can see we get a composer-setup.exe. So if you click that one, it is going to download a Composer setup, and all you have to do is open it up and install it. So if we open it here, we're going to make sure that we say install for all users, which is the recommended one. So we click this one, and you're going to go and say yes to the pop-up because there's going to be one. Once we have the setup started, you just want to say next. Then you want to make sure that this path here is actually pointing to where you have PHP installed. So currently, because I have XAMPP installed, you can see that the path here is actually pointing into my XAMPP folder, into my PHP folder, and inside to my php.exe execution file. So this is the PHP installation, so to speak, inside XAMPP. So make sure it has this one selected. If not, then you're going to have to browse for it. It is inside your XAMPP folder in this path that I have here. Okay, so we click next, and then it's going to set up Composer, and then we're just going to say next, and then we want to say install. And that is basically it. And it will give you a couple of important notices here. You might need to close down all the different Explorer windows that you have. So for example, the this one here, you need to close these down. You want to make sure that maybe that you actually restart your computer because it can run into some errors if you don't do so. So it has a couple of different steps here if something were to happen which doesn't need to happen. So if at some point inside this video here you might get an error message, try restarting your computer and see if that helps. Basically, that is what Composer is trying to say, okay? So we're going to say next, and then we're going to say finish. And that means we now have Composer installed. So once we did all of this, we need to do one more thing before we're really, ready to start installing Laravel and all that kind of thing, which is a step that can seem a little bit frightening to some people. Basically, you're going to be adding Composer and PHP into your path inside your system. And this is something that some people may not have done before, okay? The basic explanation to what we're about to do is that if I were to go inside my command prompt and I want to gain access to Composer in order to do something. So let's say I want to ask Composer to install Laravel into a certain website project, then I need to write a command for Composer inside the terminal. But in order to make this process easier, since I don't want to go into the Composer's installation path and before I can actually start writing commands for Composer, setting a path for Composer basically means that I have a global access to Composer. So I can just go directly in and just write commands for Composer directly. Okay, so that is something that we might want to do because otherwise it's going to get quite frustrating and annoying every single time I want to do something with Composer and PHP. So let's go ahead and go into our Explore. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you right click on this PC, go down to Properties, and then inside here, you're going to go into your system settings. And on the side here, it says Advanced System Settings. There's a small link over here. Once you click that, it's going to open a small window. Down here at the bottom, you can see we have something called Environment Variables. Again, this is on PC. There's also a way to do this on Mac, and I will have a small link in the description that will tell you how to do this on a Mac. Okay, so on a PC, we're going to go inside Environment Variables, go in here, and at the bottom, it is going to say System Variables. We want to be setting PHP and also Composer as our system variables. So we have a link to where these are, so we can just directly use them. So going down inside New, you can see that we need two things. We need a variable name and a variable value. So for example, if I were to go inside where I have PHP installed, so I'm just going to go inside my htdocs folder, which is inside XAMPP. I'm going to go back, and then you can see we have a PHP folder. If I go in here and scroll down a little bit, you can see we have a php.exe file. This is the one that we want to link to. So go ahead and copy the path, go inside to where it says variable value, paste it in, make sure you have \php.exe because we need to get the executable path. So do that and then create a variable name. This could be PHP and then say OK. And then that will be added as a new system variable. Now I've done this already, so I'm just going to cancel. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set Composer as our system variable. Now this one is slightly different. You can actually see I already have it in here as well. This one you're going to find by going inside your this PC, go inside local disk, go inside where we have program data. Now if you don't see this folder, it's because it's hidden. So you need to go inside view at the top here and make sure that hidden items are ticked on. Okay, otherwise you can't see this folder. So go down inside this folder. Then you can see we have Composer set up. Click this one, go inside bin, and then copy this path here. You don't need to include the composer.bat or anything like that, just this path up here. So make sure you copy it, go inside and create a new system variable. Say this one is called something like Composer, and then paste in the value, which is the path, into where this place is. Okay, and then you're going to say OK. Now I've done this already, so I'm just going to cancel. But this is basically how you can set these up so they can be accessed globally inside your computer. So what we can do now is we can actually verify if we do actually have Composer installed in our system by going inside our command prompt or your terminal and type in a small command just to check which version of Composer and PHP we have installed on our computer currently. Now you do need to close down your command prompt and restart it because otherwise you might not get anything going on. So we do need to restart it, and then you're going to write Composer space -- version. Click enter, and then you can see we have Composer version blah 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 and PHP version blah blah blah, right? So this actually confirms that we have these installed, and if you don't get these, it means that you skipped something or you forgot to do something that we did previously. Maybe didn't set up a system variable. make sure you did everything in this video and you should be getting this. Again, also try restarting your computer if you're not getting it, because that is also something that could be causing it. But what we can do now is we can actually go and install Laravel into Composer, so we can then grab Laravel from Composer and use inside any sort of new website project that we might want to be creating, right? So that is what Composer does. We download Laravel into Composer and it just kind of hangs on to it until we need to use it inside a website. So what you're going to do is you're going to type in a command called composer space global space require space Laravel /installer, which is actually going to download the installer off the internet and install it inside Composer. So if I click enter here, you can see that it's going to start installing things, and it's just going to run its course. It's going to do a bunch of things. So as you can see, it's installing, we're getting Laravel, everything is working, and just kind of let it do its thing here. And then at the end here, it should be successfully installed. So with Laravel now installed, because this is what we need to do now, Laravel is installed in our system, or at least inside Composer, is that now we can actually go and start using Laravel inside our projects. However, we do need to do one more thing before we start doing things with Laravel. Otherwise, you might encounter some error messages, which is we need to set up XAMPP to properly work together with Laravel. So go ahead and open up your XAMPP installation place and go inside your PHP folder, scroll down until you find the php.ini file, which is going to be down here right below the php.exe file. Open this up inside your text editor, because we're going to be changing a couple of things in here. So inside my text editor, if I click Control F or Command F on Mac, then I can actually search for things. So it says find, and then I can go ahead and say that I want to search for extension equal to zip. And then you can see I have a extension here called zip. And you want to make sure this one is uncommented. So if you see a semicolon in front of it, go ahead and remove it so it's uncommented. Okay. The next thing you want to uncomment is one called file info. So search for file info, and as you can see, it's right here. This is actually a re-uploaded tutorial, because in my last version, I did actually say to uncomment two other things. I want you to make sure that you double check if you're getting any sort of errors while you're installing a new Laravel project. Because in the last video, we did get a SSL error. I want you to uncomment one other thing, which is actually the one that is right down here, which is called extension equal to MySQLi. Make sure this one is uncommented as well, but do not uncomment the one called SSL. Actually, it's called Open SSL. So do not uncomment this one, because you may receive an error message while you're trying to install Laravel, because this one will actually have two extensions of the same kind open at the same time and may throw an error message. So just go ahead and close down the php.ini file. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and go up to where it says terminal and open up a new terminal. Now, the reason we can use a terminal inside our code editor is because we set up Composer and PHP inside our system variables. So because we did that, we can actually start using them directly inside the terminal inside our text editor, which is really nice because we don't have to go inside our command prompt every single time. We can just close this down. We don't need this anymore. And instead, we're just going to use this terminal in here. And you may notice something inside the terminal, which is that right now we have a path set to C drive, users, the name of your user. So this is not really a path inside a specific project or inside a specific folder. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to navigate inside my dashboard folder, which is inside my XAMPP installation. So I'm just going to say File, Open Folder. Then I'm going to go inside XAMPP. Make sure I go inside my htdocs folder, inside my dashboard folder, and then from here, I'm just going to say select folder. And again, I do have some files in here. Just go ahead and ignore those for now because you're not going to have these files. Your dashboard folder should be completely empty unless you have some websites in there. But just go ahead and open this one up, go back inside terminal, say new terminal, and then you can see now it points to a new path, which is the XAMPP folder, htdocs dashboard. And the reason you want to make sure we're inside this path here is because we're going to set up a new project which is based on Laravel inside this path here. So basically we're creating a new website inside our dashboard folder. So what we're going to go and do here is we're going to say Laravel, because now we have it installed in our system so we can actually refer to it. we're going to say space, new, and then the name of your new project. In my case, I'm going to say first website. Then I'm going to click enter. And as you can see, I do actually get an error message here, and that's again because we need to restart the software just like Composer told us. I'm going to go ahead and restart my software here. So after restarting VS Code, make sure you go back inside your dashboard folder, and inside the terminal, you can actually go up and down on your keyboard and see all the previous commands that we tried to run inside the terminal. So you can click up, and then you can see we have Laravel new first website. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and start creating a new project. So I'm going to click enter. And then it's going to run the installation or setup process for setting up a new Laravel project. Now, some people have told me that they're not getting this setup process and it just starts installing Laravel for the first time. That's fine. But what we can actually do here is we can set up a couple of different settings for our installation of Laravel. Now, in the first one here, it asks, would you like to install a starter kit? For now, we're just going to go ahead and say none, because we do not want to have one, at least here in the beginning of this tutorial here. If you want to later on experiment with, let's say, Jetstream, you can do that. For now, let's just go ahead and leave it at default. So we're just going to say none. The next thing it's going to ask us is which testing framework do you prefer? In this case, you can choose between Pest and PHP Unit. In this case here, Pest is the more newer and modern version that we can use. So we're just going to go ahead and say Pest. So we're going to say 0. Enter. And after it's done doing all of this, it's going to ask you if you want to migrate, or at least as you can see here, which database application you want to use for your website. Now in this case here, we're going to be using MySQL, but we do need to set up a database first. Otherwise, it's going to give you some errors because there's no database to migrate database tables into. So we do need to make sure that we have a database set up already before we start doing anything here with telling it what kind of database you want to be using. I do want to point out that if you do type MySQL from here and you clicked enter, nothing is going to go wrong because you can still afterwards set up your database. It is just going to re-ask you once you open up the website, there's no tables inside your database. Do you want to migrate the tables in there? And then you're just going to say run migration, and then it's going to do it. So nothing is going to go horribly wrong if you start typing something here. It's not really going to be a big deal. But let's go ahead and open up our XAMPP control panel and actually start up our Apache and MySQL server. And after doing this, we can go back inside our browser, and we're going to go ahead and open up a new tab, and we're going to say localhost /PHP myadmin. And once you have PHP myadmin open, you're going to go inside databases at the top here. And inside databases, you're going to go ahead and create a new database called first website. So first website, and then click create. Now, I do already have a first website created in here because I did, like I said, recreate this tutorial. So I do already have one. And after creating it, you can actually see the database on the side here. So you can click it, and then you can see we have nothing going on inside the table. So going back inside VS Code, I'm going to say that we have a MySQL database. Click enter, and then it asks, do you want to migrate the database default migrations? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And doing that, it's going to set up the different tables inside your database. So going back inside PHP myadmin, refreshing, you can now see that we have a bunch of tables in here. So we have like a users table, we have sessions, different things that are incorporated into Laravel because users, like creating a login system, is built into Laravel. So this is something that it creates for us at the very beginning. So with all this set up now, we can go back inside our project, and we have now actually set up Laravel inside our computer and set up a new Laravel project. So go inside your first website over here on the side, and you can see that we have a bunch of files because these are your Laravel default files that it installs for you when you set up a new project. Now, don't get overwhelmed because yes, seeing this many folders and files is something that do overwhelm people from time to time. But we're going to go ahead and take this one step at a time as we progress in these tutorials here. So just go ahead and know for now that you don't need to know everything that is going on inside every file inside this project here. So you don't need to get overwhelmed over the fact that there's so many files in here. I do want to show you one more thing before we end off the video, which is our website, because we do have a website now. So with XAMPP running, so make sure you have the Apache server and the MySQL server running, we can actually go back inside our browser, go inside the tab at the top here, say localhost. Then you can see we get all the different folders inside our localhost folder or inside the dashboard folder. And you will notice, again, I have some files that you don't have. Just ignore those for now. But go inside your first website folder. And in here, you're going to notice all these different files that we have inside VS Code. Like these are the same files. What you want to do is you want to go inside the public folder. And in here, we have our website. I think I have mine zoomed in here. I'm just going to zoom out for you. So this is your freshly installed Laravel project, okay? These are just some default placeholders that Laravel installed inside your front page. So we don't need to use these. We can always remove these if we want to. But this is your front page to your new website. So this is how we can set up Laravel in a fairly easy way inside our computer. And again, I just want to point out here for the beginners that whenever you want to create a new Laravel project, you don't need to do everything in this tutorial here. You just need to go back inside VS Code, go inside your dashboard folder, and from in here, you just want to make sure that you run if you go inside the terminal here, you just want to run the Laravel new and then new project name, and then run the installation process again, and then that's it. Like that's how you create a new Laravel website. And now before we end off the video here, if you got an error at some point when you tried to set up your database or something like that, and you're still getting error messages, instead of seeing this, you might be seeing error messages basically. What you can also do is you can go inside your project, go down to the bottom here where you have a .env file, open this one up, and inside of here, you can see we have a couple of different settings for our Laravel project. Like these are environment settings. So a couple of things you'll notice is that we do actually have things like app name. We have things like app URL. We have things like, if you go down to the database connection, is it a MySQL database? Yes, it is. What database port are you using? What is the name of your database? What is the username for your database? What is the password? Like there's a couple of things in here that you need to make sure are in order, because the password for your database is pretty important if this is incorrect. So if you're getting some error messages, you can find things in here and you can change them to, for example, if you change the database name and it's not your first website, maybe you call it first website 2, then you can just change it here. So a couple of things you can do here to set up your website. So with that said, in the next video, I'm going to show you around inside our project a little bit. There's a couple of things I need to show you where is, for example, where's your front page at? So we do need to look at a couple of things inside this project, just so you have a faint idea about where some of the things might be at. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time.